आज इंटरनेट सिर्फ आधे अधूरे सच और पूरे झूठ में डूबा हुआ है। किसी के पास गहराई से सोचने का या शांति से सुनने का वक्त ही नहीं है। हम एक ऐसा शांत कोना बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। Nope, not your ordinary podcast for entertainment.
Nope.
आपकी स्टडी रही है ज़्यादा, यहाँ आप जो बारे में लिखते हैं वो ज़्यादा फूड और फूड की पॉलिटिक्स पे है. व्हाट इज़ द पॉलिटिक्स ऑफ फूड एंड व्हाई इज़ फूड पॉलिटिकल?
I mean, I don't know why food is not political, because how many people do you share your lunch boxes with, or how many people do you sit and actually have a meal with? मेरी इंटरव्यू पे 5 साल पहले जब मैंने काम पे शुरू करने के पहले गया था यूनिवर्सिटी पे, उन्होंने पूछा कि why do you want to work here, or what about our university stood out for you? And मैंने बोला कि जब मैं कैफेटेरिया में बैठा था तो हाउसकीपिंग स्टाफ, स्टूडेंट्स सब एक ही कैफेटेरिया में एक साथ टेबल में बैठ के खा रहे थे, एंड इट वाज शॉकिंग फॉर मी टू सी दिस. सब स्कूल में गए थे, व्हेन हैव यू सीन द हाउसकीपिंग स्टाफ सिट इन द कैफेटेरिया ऑन द टेबल एंड ईट विथ यू? एंड a big chunk of my family on the mother's side works as housekeeping staff in universities in Bangalore. And for me to go to those universities and to be told that I can't sit with everyone के साथ बैठ के नहीं खा सकते हो, and that's the reality I come from. So to tell, if you're telling me food is not political, I think it's funny.
No, I'm understanding why is it political, but let's talk about the Indian context. Why it's political and just why is it so political in India, food?
I mean,
There are hard political lines around food.
very straight answer is caste, but somehow everybody has been obsessed with beef though. Beef has been always everybody's point of contention कि हाँ beef खाते हैं नहीं खाते हैं, but beef is not the only politics of food, right? At a course I teach जिस पे हम food के बारे में बात करते हैं, we had a new person teaching this course as well. Beef के बारे में बात कर सकते हैं क्या इस course में? I'm like, that's the least political thing about food if you want to talk about. It's not beef. Beef is carrying a lot of tensions in the current regime, in the current context, but it is not the only one. I mean, it's easier to talk about food than water, because how many people are willing to share their water bottles? How many people are willing to share a glass of water with another person? Like, nahi tumne, I think in school they would say, you drank directly from my water bottle.
झूठा कर लिया.
Exactly. So that is the context in which we live in this country, where nobody wants to share a meal, nobody wants to share a glass of water, and they don't even want to give you a spoon. Last week I was eating lunch with a colleague and I was struggling to put the spoon in my mouth. I was just dropping the food into my mouth and she was like, kya kar rahe ho, theek se kha lo na. And I need to be told this. As a Dalit person, I've been conditioned my entire life to maintain some distance from other people, because there is a violence in which people treat you when you talk to them about food, or in how you interact with them. And that is a violence that is never understood. And I think my work got popular when I wrote about how food is tied with poverty, how food is tied with caste, and suddenly the number of people who could relate to it, and it happened in the pandemic. सबने pandemic में खाने के बारे में इतना सोच लिया कि oh my god, cooking में इतना time जाता है क्या? And there were movies that were talking about it as well. Great Indian Kitchen तो तमाशा लगा दिया था पूरा देश में. So there is nuance in food that we've forgotten in some sense. There's labor in food. कौन बनाता है खाने को? Who's growing the food? Where is it coming from? All of these are nuances that shock people. I mean, how many of us understand the public distribution system is giving substandard food to a large chunk of the poor in this country? It is political, it is economics, but कौन बात कर रहा है इसके बारे में? Why does nobody want to know? I don't know how to make it a coherent thought anymore, because the more I learn, the more I dig into this, the more I say, I feel like, why am I getting in the middle of this ocean? क्या है इसमें? क्यों करना है मुझे? Why can't I just take my salary and go home?
हाँ, आई अंडरस्टैंड दैट, बट जैसे कास्ट का एक एंगल है और उसमें पैंडेमिक जैसी एक बहुत बड़ा एक इवेंट हो जाता है, तो उसके बाद जो एक तो हाइजीन फोबिया को कास्ट के एंगल से छुपा के नो वी आर ट्राइंग टू मेंटेन हाइजीन एंड ऑर्डर एंड यू नो.
हाँ, पैंडेमिक में वही किया था ना. व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप में देख लो, हम ज़माने से बोल रहे थे इनकी खाना मत खाओ. वी वर मेकिंग दिस सेग्रीगेशन सेइंग ऑन टर्म्स ऑफ हाइजीन. Is it really hygiene? Are you worried about hygiene? Are you saying another person is so unclean and dirty that you can't touch them? You can't touch their shadow? Is this always about hygiene? So it is very convenient to say it's hygiene, because the other day in class when I asked my students ki kitne log in school carried a water bottle, and how many of you were told you can't drink from my water bottle? I think more than half the class put their hands up and say, yes, we don't share our water bottle. We were told they wouldn't share our water bottle. And nobody thought it was not a problem. Suddenly, it's normal. But it's only normal in India or South Asia. It's not a normal phenomenon across the world, right? Because it is so intrinsically tied to how we view. I mean, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar spoke about in Annihilation of Caste how interdining is one way of annihilating caste. If you're not willing to sit with this person and have a meal, how will you know who they are or what they eat? I had a conversation with somebody who's very progressive, writer, has said incredible things about feminism, queer politics, and they said, kuch zamane ke pehle, when our parents would invite people home, even if they served people a separate plate and they wouldn't share it, they wouldn't tell the guest. And wasn't that better? I'm like, I don't know. I think it's better today when I know these people are explicitly keeping me out than pretending that they are not treating me as an equal. So I don't think things have changed significantly. It's always been around. We're just seeing it in focus today.
जैसे बीफ के आजू बाजू काफी मिथ है कि one is that beef is expensive. So why are you going for the expensive meat and why don't you go for mutton? Second is that what I've learned is that in India, beef is not as expensive because we are using the cow for milk also, and really a lot of milk we produce. So that's why I thought beef is not that expensive. But what's your view on it? Is it a...
There are two misconceptions that, I mean, people are not just eating cow. Buffalo is what's consumed more than the cow. So beef is often buffalo meat. Cow is not as frequently consumed. And two, beef is not expensive. Beef is much cheaper than mutton. It's a bigger animal and mutton is a smaller animal. I mean, so my father used to take care of cows growing up, and my grandmother's taken care of cows growing up. So they're all they don't eat buffalo meat or cow meat or any of these other meats. And it isn't uncommon for Dalits to not eat buffalo, but the assumption is, oh, tum bas buffalo hi khate ho ya beef hi khate ho. And a friend of mine, Sri Vamshi, who's doing this series of plays called Come Eat With Me. It's a theatre practice where he invites people to come sit with him and eat. He talks about how he only cooks chicken here because he also wants to tell people कि हम और कुछ चीज़ भी खाते हैं. It's not just beef that we eat. We eat various other meats. And also people were eating, there's no preference. I mean, if you trace back in history, before cows arrived in India, people were eating horses. जो मिलता था वो खाते थे. It wasn't a conception of, this is your prize-possessed animal, so I will stab it and eat it. That wasn't the intention, right? I mean, if they had that much power in society, wouldn't the caste system have already been eradicated in some capacity?
But एक और एक misconception है या view है लोगों का कि the vegetarian way of life is more sustainable for the planet. तो उसके लिए हमें beef नहीं खाना चाहिए. Because if you think about the environment, meat eating and how it is, making farmers grow corn and all of the water that goes into cleaning the cow and all of that, we should shift towards vegetarianism or veganism, and it is for the environment. So काफी लोग ये angle से भी आते हैं कि what about the environment?
I mean, अगर अमेरिका के data निकाल कर इंडिया पर छापोगे तो it will sound correct when it isn't correct, right? In America, they're growing, taking care of cows in that capacity where they're feeding them and harvesting them for their meat. In India, cows are not harvested or buffaloes are not harvested for their meat in the same capacity. They're not contributing to the greenhouse effect the same way. In India, it's the chicken poultry so contributing in that capacity. So sabko chicken khana stop karna if you're that conscious about the environment. Chicken is the bigger problem in the two meats. Mutton is more expensive, but then beef is your best alternative, honestly, if you're talking about environmental science. And there's a new book that came out earlier last year called Dalit Kitchens of Marathwada, which is an excellent anthropological study of what were the Dalits of Marathwada eating and why were they eating it. From the idea of rearing a goat from its birth so that you have a harvest a year later, 2 years later, where you sacrifice it to a goddess and you consume every last bit of it. From the hooves, from the bone, from every last bit of this animal is consumed. It's not wasted. It is the most sustainable practice. The better chickens to consume are the desi chickens that you grow in your backyard. They're actually environmentally far better and sustainable. It is what is grown in a factory that's harmful. So the milk is actually a worse practice to consume. So stop eating your ghee, curd, milk. you're doing better job than when you stop eating buffalo.
But आपने एक और चीज़ आपके स्टडी में है कि there's not just food cooked in the kitchen. When you say that there's not just food which is cooked in the kitchen, so we understand the politics of meat, but what else is in the kitchen?
So a couple of things. I think when I first piece came out about food, a bunch of women journalists reached out to me saying, "Oh, do you want to talk about Dalit women in the kitchen and their experience cooking?" I'm like, मैं तो आदमी हूँ, उनके बारे में मैं क्या जानता हूँ? If you want, I can put you in touch with women, Dalit women, activists who've been working for 3-4 decades now. But this also reminds me of going back to how when a publisher was asked why aren't there more books on caste, they said, मैं तो नहीं जानता हूँ किसी को जो दलित है. So this idea of this invisible Dalit, what do they cook, eat, is already a problem. The piece I wrote about in a Goya journal a couple of years ago about eating goat's blood, which was not a delicacy, but it was the only source of special food that you eat on the weekend. Because I don't know if you're a meat eater, you're familiar with the concept of घर में special क्या बना है आज. And that's again a social pressure of what is your family's economic stance like. And also it's a nutritional choice. If you're already buying the cheapest vegetable in the market, there's not a lot of nutrition you're meeting. So people would buy the meat of an animal that was butchered and they let it coagulate and that was cooked. There are also vegetables and greens that are foraged. So I have stories of when my mum was younger and would go to the lake nearby to do laundry. On the way back, they'd harvest a bunch of greens around the lake that was edible and you'd bring back. So all food that's coming into your kitchen is not necessarily bought by a grocer, is not necessarily shopped for. It's all coming from various places. Of course, urbanization and cities don't have those spaces anymore. And again, I grew up in Bangalore. This is foraging in Bangalore in the 90s. It wasn't 50 years ago. It was as recent as the 90s. But you can't do it anymore. You're already losing access to food. Why is India ranking so low on global hunger index? Why are people not having food? These are all... I mean, Karnataka government didn't have enough money to provide eggs in midday meal for school children. They could only do it for 2 days. Somebody had to step up to support for the rest 4 days. It was a private party that ended up supporting it. So this is the status of the country.
Just to understand this better, Vinay, you're saying if we are more of a meat-eating nation,
statistically, we are. Only 70 to 80% of India eats meat. Only 20 to 30 does not eat meat.
But for example, where it comes about serving food, we take meat out, right? Or midday meals. So what I'm asking you is, if India is meat eating, does that for sure say that nutritionally our kids and adults will be better?
I mean, that's the entire egg campaign from the 90s, right? The government has stepped up saying, Anda khao roz, to meet this nutrition deficit. The egg carries so much more nutritionally. To quote a couple of doctors, Dr. Sylvia Karpagam, who has been working on the nutritional rights of children in Karnataka, talks about how it's easier for animal meat for our body to consume. It's easier for our body to process and convert animal meat into energy and nutrition than plant meat. It's just easier on the body. It takes longer to convert plant into nutrition or absorb nutrition from plant sources. ये मैं साइंस बोल रहा हूँ मैं.
हाँ, वही है कि काफ़ी लोग कन्विंस नहीं होते हैं इससे. Like I get the idea कि चिकन खाना एनवायरनमेंट के लिए ज़्यादा हानिकारक है versus beef या versus buff. तो पर काफ़ी लोग ये बात से कन्विंस नहीं होंगे. They will be like, and also the religious angle of हम पूछते हैं गाय को, तो उसका क्या?
I mean, even the animal sacrifice practices I was talking about, people ask the goat before they sacrifice it, before it's harvested. They wait. I've grown up watching people waiting for 2-3 hours before they sacrifice this animal. The idea of you're taking away a life is never forgotten. It is in respect of the life you're taking that you make sure that every bit of its body is used. It does come from an extremely conscious place. Nobody is unconscious of this consumption. And that is my biggest critique of veganism, where they think people are unconscious. If you're so concerned about you're so willing to understand the plight of another animal but not a fellow human being, it worries me. And that's been my biggest problem with vegans who are blind to Indian social fabric, where people are willing to extend love for a dog but not a human being who's probably not the same caste or class. And that is the struggle, right? To tell you care more for a human being who does not look like you. And that is the struggle with food, right? It's so easy to understand India by the food we eat.
I think in the West also this Thanksgiving notion. What would it be 300 years ago? I'm sure the turkey was not packed, and I'm sure there will be some amount of hunting that would have gone into it.
Thanksgiving is supposed to be a practice where you're thanking the natives who were violently moved away from their homes, who you colonized. So that already is an ironic practice where you're thanking them for letting them grab their land.
Yeah.
So it's already a politically problematic idea, and it's easier for us to say it here, right? Because we're not in the West, we're not in a Christian majority nation that way. Again, it is a whole other set of politics, the Thanksgiving. So this is the vegan problem, right? They bring in facts about America and they try to put it on India. बोल रहे कि ये हम नहीं कर सकते. I remember this vegan friend who told me, you look like you earn enough money, why aren't you vegan? Like, ये क्या होता है? तुम, how do you know what my bank balance is? कहाँ से तुम ये fact assume कर रहे हो?
But also ये assume कर रहे हैं तुम्हारा bank balance, और उसके आगे वो बोल भी रहे हैं कि हम तो सस्ता नहीं कर पा रहे, sorry, तुम ज़्यादा पैसे कमा लो, which is quite like.
And when I said no, not everybody can afford your cashew milk, they're like, दाल चावल भी खा सकते हो, वो भी vegan है. Like पूरा जिंदगी में दाल चावल खाओ और तुम oatmeal खाओ.
मैंने इस पे स्टैंड अप में भी बोला है, वेजिटेरियनिज्म में जो प्योर का एंगल है ना, वो मुझे कभी समझ में नहीं आता है.
I mean, it's the same idea, right? It's cultural capital. Pure veg is वही है ना. There's a academic called Nivedita Menon who talks about in purity, nothing comes up. If it's 100% clean, उसमें कुछ नहीं आएगा. Nothing will grow in 100% sanity or pure place. So why are we so obsessed with 100% pure veg? It is a caste purity we're talking about. MTR, which is the brand, the face of pure veg products in this country, built itself on this idea of a vegetarian capital. They started in a small room in Bangalore. This Brahmin couple said, oh, look, we are Brahmins, we are very hygienic and clean people, so we'll serve you this clean breakfast, come eat it from us. That's how they built their entire brand. And this is the idea that people are not taking into account. Why are people selling you pure veg food? They're telling you hygiene and pure are getting coded here as equal. They're not equal. Hygiene and pure is not the same thing. They're extremely different connotations, but they have become one. दोनों को एक ही बना दिया. We're in that place where we're saying pure and hygiene is the same, and it's not.
And the argument of that you can fall more sick if you eat meat because more diseases are transmitted through meat than food which is veg.
I mean,
I think it's untrue. But
extremely untrue. Deep fried के लिए भी वही करता है. I mean, there are doctors who are telling people don't eat meat even when there is no scientific basis to it. They're just saying because मेरे दादी भी बोल रही थी तो ठीक है, दादी की बात सही है, मैं MBBS किया हूँ पर दादी की बात सही है. At some point, I think we need to, I think that's what the nation was built on, right? Rational scientific thinking, and somehow we've still not fully taken it into account. If we had fully rationally, scientifically thought things through, Sylvia Karpagam wouldn't be fighting on Twitter with trolls calling her a rice bag every time she says scientifically you should eat nutritional meat because it's better for you. Just, yeah, it's a terrible state of affairs when people are easier to buy into this idea of culture and practice because we've been doing it for decades. That's not a good enough argument anymore, I think, but how do you convince people?
But the ritualistic angle of sacrifice or acknowledgement, there is also a whole movement of religious spirituality which is based on veg food.
Again, if you trace back, vegetarianism entered Hinduism as a counter for Buddhism. It was when Buddhism adopted not eating meat, they said, oh no, we have competition here, and their argument is they're non-violent. We need to compete with these guys in some capacity. There are enough accounts of meat-eating practices. I mean, why were animals sacrificed in yagnas? Do you think they were throwing away all the animal that was cooked in the flame at the end of it? They weren't. They were eating whatever was sacrificed into a yagna. I think it is conveniently ignoring facts. It's conveniently cherry-picking what you think is correct, what you think will work for you today, right? There is no spiritual backing for vegetarianism. Vegetarianism became a part of a Hindu fabric because it was a counter to Buddhism. When Buddhism was taking over the Indian society, or
because like the butter, ghee and milk is, if you see how it is kind of how you're getting to that, it's very violent.
Yeah, I mean, Gujarat during, I think, Dashera, the product that sold the highest is ghee. Ghee is bought in tons. I don't think this country runs on ghee, not chai, but ghee.
Yeah, ghee, also paneer, butter. I mean, I still do eat those things, but then I won't be like, oh, these are cruelty free, because they're not.
What is the line? What is the line we're trying to draw? Why is it that we're cherry picking some animals? Why is this concept then not applying to abusing the cow in the dairy industry, right? If you're so worried about the cow, why are popular brands that are making money out of other animals surviving comfortably in UP, but not slaughterhouses for beef? India was the second biggest exporter of beef in the world. We were sending out beef across the world. How are we conveniently ignoring this fact? When Maharashtra banned slaughterhouses, it pretty much broke the Kolhapuri chapel industry, because the industry was dependent on the leather of the cow or the buffalo. And that entire craft is lost today. Now they're finding alternatives to replace it, but a leather chapel and a wooden chapel are not the same.
So this politics about leather also is there, because a lot of leather, basically the kind of way you get to leather from animal skin, it's a process. And again, once you see it or you understand it, it'll be very difficult for you to play the instruments that are apparently this
Secret to the
sacred, way to connect with God. But if you see how those drums are made, or how those, it will be difficult for you to play it after that. So what is the politics of leather then? Because it comes right after food.
So again, when I was talking about animal sacrifice, even the leather is harvested. So there's a relationship between the person who butchers the goat and who then the family that's taking the leather, the meat from them. You exchange a part of the animal and you give them the leather, which they will sell or make something out of it. Again, if you're looking at a system that is in its way conscious of consumption, then we already have it. And yet we are pushing it away. We're saying, nahi, ye nahi karna hai, because this is not, this is not an upper caste practice. But it's very simply that. There is no other reason to dismiss it, because you think and you assume that this category of people are below you and their ideas have to be backward. They cannot in any ways be progressive of forward thinking. There are all these layers of disbelief that you have. I mean, I've grown up hearing my aunts, my uncles telling me how people constantly say, "Aap Dalit ho? Sach mein jhoot nahi bol rahe ho? Did you not lie for this, or because you wanted a seat somewhere?" And they have to constantly prove to other people that we are Dalit. Like, क्योंकि अच्छे कपड़े तो नहीं पहन सकते, and you can't look healthy. You have to look dirty, shabby, and skinny to be Dalit in this country. So, to occupy all of these spaces is a little, I don't know, how else do you prove?
Basically, when it comes to leather also, the use of leather, vegan leather, it's just that जैसे इसमें इम्पैक्ट जिस पे हो रहा है, कि अगर बोलो कि नहीं यार, मुझे लोगों का ओपिनियन चेंज करना है लेदर पे, I want them to not. So the industry that you are impacting, those people, what do they do? And similarly, if we have a similar approach towards milk, then the industry that's impacted, what do we do about it?
This is that I will conveniently step back and say, my field of work is literature. I'm not in the business of giving solutions, but how do you negotiate this process, right? Because then people are very conveniently pushing away what's not working for them and taking in only what's working. Because if we were so bothered about the plight of the cow, we should have banned the dairy industry. We wouldn't be fighting on the rising prices of milk, right? The prices of milk have exponentially grown in the last 10 years without limit. And the prices of coffee and tea are growing every day in restaurants. But somehow that's never been a problem, but eating beef has been a problem for the last 20 years, easily.
So it's basically the politics and the caste that is...
It is very simply the angle of caste, right? In Bangalore, even though the beef, there was never a ban on slaughterhouses, every time every time there were instances of violence against any butcher, shops in Bangalore would shut. Just out of fear, right? People wouldn't run their stores because they're worried somebody's going to come attack them. There is a genuine fear of this. What is the precedent? I'm not sure. There hasn't been a precedent, but nobody wants to be at the receiving end of this violence that's waiting for you.
So when you teach this to students, what changes in them? What changes, like have students come to you and said that after I had a conversation with, someone in my family and this is what they had to say about it? Because I'm sure if you suddenly get into a classroom and find out, okay, oh my God, everything that I've eaten in my life is to do with my social identity, they might have many questions.
So when I start this unit, I ask them, what is India? What is Indian food? And then I ask them, is dog meat Indian food? Is rat meat Indian food? Is snake meat Indian food? And they're all obviously extremely disgusted when I list these things out, but various parts of this country do consume these meats. And then I try to tell them that these are what is geographically available. This is a practice that's dependent on consuming what's easily available for us, right? So there is no intention of, there's no thought of intention of saying, oh, this is not Indian or this is Indian meat I need to be consuming. And I don't try to tell them or teach them that this is different, but I make sure that they have a path to arrive here on their own. Because if you're going to tell somebody this is correct and this is wrong, they're never willing to take it or accept it. But if you navigate this direction or conversation for them to arrive on their own, I think it offers a change. And honestly, in the classroom, I've learned that none of these things will transpire within a semester or a year. Sometimes it takes about 5 or 10 years for them to arrive at this realization. And it is a game of patience at the end of the day. You don't expect this change immediately. It is a long accumulating change. You hope that in time they notice this. If you're waiting for immediate gratification, then you shouldn't be teaching. I don't think it'll happen immediately.
No, but they must be curious about it at
They're
least.
definitely curious, and there are ones who are writing back to me because email is the form of communication there. They're constantly asking more questions. They're reading more. When I talk to students about, let's think about food through gig workers, Swiggy delivery partners and their plight. And it changes how they consume practices, right? Just thinking of the labor laws and how much pollution does somebody is permissible for them to encounter in their job, and then you apply to a gig worker who's stuck in traffic through the day and how much pollution they consume, and they're suddenly shook because we're so stuck in our daily lives and bubbles, we don't think of another person or their plight.
You know, most people are under the impression that they are creating jobs by ordering Swiggy and Zomato, and while it's the other way around.
They're taking away more jobs and they're making it worse, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think we are addicted to quick commerce at least, and if I think someone said this, I'm forgetting who, that if the pinnacle of our innovation is getting food in 10 minutes, then we're gone. We're pretty behind.
I mean, somehow this is seen as not being lazy. This is not seen as not hardworking. But when this hard work concept is also what makes me curious, that how are we not thinking of this when it's coming to how with ease and convenience things are arriving at your doorstep. But there is a whole large chunk of this country that has to struggle just for that one meal, and you're calling them lazy. And I'm not pushing this on somebody else because it's a hard conversation with my father. I'm not taking it too far. He's not willing to understand that, despite all this hard work you're expecting somebody from the working class to do, and they're at the end maybe successfully going to have 2 meals a day, why should they work harder? There is no point in this hard work, but we're all pushing them to work harder. And then there are people comfortably sitting in their home in some capacity and everything's arriving at their doorstep, but they're not seen as lazy. So who is the lazy person? Who's the hardworking?
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. Who is lazy and who is hardworking? But coming to what drew you first towards this as a subject? Because I'm interested, I'm a foodie, I'm interested in food. So what do? You go to, you take recommendations, you go to places, you have your opinion about food. What drew you to kind of take notice to the social order of food?
So I was freelancing as a journalist before I started teaching. And then I was struggling to make money. And then I saw there was a food magazine and they were looking for pieces about food. And I realized not many people had published about food and caste.
Yeah.
It was surprising. And then I pitched this story to them because I needed the money at that point and I didn't think too much about it. But the fact of the way they responded to this piece is what surprised me. That this was an innovative concept and this was something I grew up with. This was never something that I didn't notice. This was not something, because it's my lived reality, right? It is what I see and consume. The first piece I wrote about was how my family was making sure they hid their poverty in the food that we consume, because the lunchbox I open in my classroom during lunch hour would tell people if I'm rich or poor. And how did my family try to navigate that was a conversation I was having at that point, and it was something I knew. And when I made this observation accessible for more people related to it. A student, when they read this article, came out to me and said, when you said the shame, there's no shame in being poor, but there's shame in somebody else acknowledging that you're poor. They said that's what they related to. And I think that's what has made my work accessible to people, because writing has been limited to a certain section of people. If you go back to a lot of other podcasts you've done with people from Dalit communities, they talk about how many people in the newsroom are people from various backgrounds. I think in print journalism, 95-98% journalists are Brahmins, not even just upper caste, Brahmins. So therefore, their worldview is limited. It's not, I'm not even calling them casteist at this point. I'm just saying their experiences are limited and they know little. And when you're going to say, I don't know anybody else other than people like me, you're also limiting what is offering. So every time I say something that's just an observation, it's earth-shaking for most people because they've not been able to see beyond the lenses that's been offered to them. It's simply just expanding your views to things around you, right? And this is what these conversations are supposed to be, telling you what is another person's perspective. But we're so busy attacking another person and fighting them, we're not willing to have a conversation anymore. It's simply that. And just the fact that I'm telling you what my lived experiences have been, and it's shaking people up saying, ye bhi hota hai kya? It is that. It's simply that we're not willing to listen to people.
हाँ मतलब इट्स लाइक मैं गीता कॉलोनी में रहता हूँ और मैंने कास्ट कभी नहीं देखी भाई शुक्ल है नहीं ना वहाँ पे so yeah but people are like discovering food now in a whole the violence of food on women, that is also a subject that people are finally realizing like कि यार नहीं इजी नहीं है कि लास्ट मिनट तुम अपने कोई दोस्त को चलो चलो घर खाना खा लेते हैं. It's not easy on someone.
It's never easy on someone. Even the fact just that.
But we are realizing it now. It's some people at least are realizing it that this needs to be planned properly.
It's also easy, no? When it's not your problem and you don't have to think about it. It takes a lot of effort on a daily basis to think about it. Who has the time? Who has the energy? When you have a wife who will do all of this and don't have to think about it, why do you have to? And it is constant effort. And there's no other way. You have to do that effort and do the work. And how many people have the luxury of it is also a question. There's no easy answer to this or an easy solution. It is just a lot of work.
In your view, what makes a person the correct kind of food conscious?
I don't think there's a correct kind of anything, right?
Yeah.
It is constantly willing to be that person who is trying to do better on a daily basis. We all want to be good human beings, right? Nobody wants to be a bad person. Yeah. But it takes a lot of effort and energy. And often, how many of us have the time?
Yeah.
On a busy day, you want to say, "Aaj mujhe kuch nahi karna hai," and or kuch nahi sochna hai. I'm not always telling people, "Ye galat hai, ye galat hai, ye galat hai." But I do it once, and that's how I'm remembered. That's true. Yeah, there's no other way of existing. And I mean, I'm coming from a family vacation where it was assumed that all the women would cook in the kitchen there, and because we had stayed at some house, all the women would cook and all the men would chill. All they did was drive up and down, bas aur kuch nahi karenge, baithenge TV ke samne. And when I was in the kitchen and doing the dishes with my sisters, they were like, the wife you're going to get is very lucky because you washed your plate. Arey yaar, when did the standards fall so low that I can wash my plate means I'm a good husband? इतना काफी है क्या?
हाँ मतलब काफी लोगों के लिए तो यही है.
हाँ. And that's what boggles my mind on a daily basis कि यार this bar can't be so low. It really cannot be so low.
Yeah, and honestly, if it is so low, then the father, further on, their involvement in parenting is also like a visiting faculty.
I mean, I've heard a father describe him taking care of his child as babysitting.
Yeah.
I'm like, तुम्हारा बच्चा है. It's not babysitting. It's your job.
Outsource कर देते हैं वो. यार लड़का स्कूल में outsource, फिर उसके बाद ट्यूशन में outsource, फिर वोकेशन में outsource.
Pass on the responsibility. पैदा कर दिया, पैसा भी है, काफी है.
Yeah, स्कूल फीस भर दिया टाइम पे. हाँ. बस. Next let's speak जब तुम्हारे results आए.
रिजल्ट निकालूंगा और बात
करते हैं. बात करेंगे मतलब अच्छे रिजल्ट्स आए. But yeah, that is also the thing is that something that we just consume ऐसे ही. उसके पीछे क्या story जानने में बहुत important है वो story.
Yeah, I mean it's also easy to vilify, like it's easy to call somebody ki ye dushman hai, this person's being evil, but there are layers in complicating and understanding this also. Why is this person behaving this way? You can humanize and empathize and understand another person's plight, but if you're going to spend your life completely empathizing on another person, when are you going to think about yourself? Who is going to think about yourself? At this point, social work mat karo, apne take care of yourself, I feel. I think that's the best way to start social work if you're very interested in it. Take care
Take care of
shit.
yourself,
Yeah.
take care of your surroundings.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Yeah. It's easier to start there. Or actually, it's more difficult to start there.
If I ask you, okay, which is the biggest myth around food in this country? Like, what would you say that is the biggest?
Vegetarianism.
Vegetarianism. And why?
I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but Shah Rukh Khan eating curd rice with his pasta and Ravan was the most disgusting idea of eating pasta, but also the idea that every South Indian is a Brahmin person who eats curd with every meal was also a stereotype that was being propagated. Earlier, it was just that North Indians are Indians and then South Indian Brahmins were the only Indians.
Yeah.
What about the rest of the 80% of this country or 70% of this country who eats everything else? And that's also the state of affairs in how policy is made, how culture is understood, right? And that's also my work in literature. The fact that you don't know or see or understand a Dalit person outside the violence they meet on a daily basis. You don't actually know anything about them. If they're not being oppressed, you don't know what they do. Unless they're being taught as people cleaning your toilets or cleaning your streets, you don't know who they are, you don't know their stories. And growing up consuming everything in Indian social medias, Indian literature, I was never there. I was never part of any of these stories. I always felt like an outsider. So it was easier for me to engage with American things or things outside India the same way because Indian things also never represented me. And as an undergraduate, when I first found Dalit literature, I'm like, oh my God, these people sound real. I know these people. They're familiar. It took me 20 years to get there. And all of these things only started arriving then in this country. When you start, I think that's what food does, right? When I'm talking about food, about what I eat, more people humanize me. More people humanize other Dalits as more than just an oppressed community. I think that's the need of the hour also. That's what vegetarianism is doing. It's trying to erase a lot of people who exist in this country. We're not all vegetarian. Why is your office meal by default vegetarian because you're one vegetarian in the office? Why is that person not accommodated?
Yeah, but the other question is in this that if you are sitting on a table and if one person is like a total softie, okay, if they kind of see chicken or smell chicken, they'll like nauseate or fall down or what do you do then?
Can't I react that way to paneer? Am I not allowed to react that way to paneer? Why is that never taken in the same capacity? Why is the vegetarian privileged? Why is the vegetarian treated so delicately and special?
Why should they be accommodated in this?
I mean, I'm not being accommodated at a table. No, nobody is thinking of my location, my identity. I need an explicit invite to go to a friend's house because I've been most often told not to come into people's houses. I need this, but this is not a kindness people are offering me. But somehow, this person who feels nauseous at the sight of chicken is given this kindness beyond. Zindagi mushkil hai bahar. But why are they given out this kindness and politeness? Why are they the ones? Why are these the softies? Why am I not a softie? Why am I not allowed to be a softie?
I got it, yeah. Because the narrative has been running through their lenses,
Yeah, that's the predominant narrative. I mean, Neeraj Kaiwan talks about how it was a struggle for him to tell people to have other surnames in their scripts.
Yeah.
Forget everything else. He's just saying have a variety of surnames of your main characters and nobody's willing their main characters to be other than Brahmin or Caste. So kab badlega dunya?
Would you like to tell our viewers about other academics that they should read on the same subject who have motivated you in some way?
I mean, academics, I don't know, but I would say pick up more Dalit writers who are publishing, right? The fact that there's only one publishing house that is going out and beyond its way to publish Dalit books. But again, it's a Brahmin man running that press. So that's the state of affairs. Nobody else knows or is interested in publishing these books because they think they won't be sold.
Yeah.
I mean, pick up Dalit Kitchens of Marathwada. It's a very easy book. It's not an academic book. This man is a garment servant who's written in the most... It was actually originally written in Marathi and then translated into English. Read Bhama. There are enough Dalit writers who are talking about their experiences in the world. Know that these humans exist around you and they occupy space. I think academics don't write for general public. So I don't know if I'd recommend an academic to the general public as much as I'd recommend a lot of other writers who are writing for the general public.
We'll talk more about the kitchen.
I think I spent a lot of time in the kitchen or even just amongst my family growing up cooking. So going back to this we don't celebrate a lot of festivals because they're not our festivals. We celebrate Ugadi, which is the New Year, and Sankranti, which is a harvest festival. And in the summer, there's a summer carnival festival of sorts where you bring the local deity and you offer a prayer, hoping there's rain, there's good health in the village. And that's when there's a lot of family comes in, you sacrifice this goat, which is about 50 people show up in the house and all the women are sitting and chopping vegetables and you discuss stories. And that's the fondest memory I have growing up of my family being a community where we sit and rehash old stories in the kitchen where all the women are sitting and cutting vegetables for the meal, which is 2 days of cooking for 50, 100 people. And there's meat, there's vegetarian food, there's a series of these things. And we're constantly talking about how this trauma happened, that person had an affair, or this person got beaten up. There are these exchanges of stories that are happening in the kitchen at that point. That's also how I know the stories of my family, right? They weren't circulated in any other way. And these also happen in the spaces where you all come together to talk about each other. You get to share memories, and that's slowly disappearing in some capacity. But again, all of this could happen in the confines of a kitchen of sorts, because it wasn't just the kitchen inside the house. Every space in the house becomes a kitchen in that capacity when you're prepping and cooking for it. And that, I think, was a very important period for my formative years of understanding the dynamics in my family, because that was the only time I was allowed to be Dalit also. Because there's a lot of training that goes in from my parents and everybody around you to not mention caste. And therefore, once you're making jokes about your caste location, you're making remarks and you're just sharing experiences and you're feeling like you're a community of people. You're not just one person who is standing up against society. This idea of community building, we didn't need somebody to externally come tell us how to be a community. We were naturally a community. And I think that was unique about that kitchen that existed. But also on the daily basis, that's where my mom would spend a lot of time. That's where I would talk to her. That my relationship with my mother did form in that kitchen. I think when I was 9 or 10, all the aunts would say, "Oh, your son is so nice. He keeps cooking in the kitchen. He keeps helping you." And my mom was worried that if I had become too independent, it would be a problem and kick me out of the kitchen. I wasn't allowed to be in the kitchen for about 7, 8 years. Like, aadmi log to ye kaam nahi karte hai. Mat aao. And I know that a lot of men have told me this, "Oh, my mom does not want me to help her in the kitchen." But if you're willing to fight this battle of feminism outside on internet or on the streets, why can't you start it at your own house and actually take a step forward? I think when that happened for me is when I realized, oh wait, this is a battle I need to pick at home, not on the streets or in the classroom, right? If I can't start it at home, it's not changing anywhere. And that's why I think the kitchen is an important ground. Also, when I talk to my students, or when I've heard growing up, people saying, "Oh, we've gifted my mother a mixer grinder," or "We've gifted my mother a fridge." And I'm like, "Ye to sab kuch chahiye hota hai ghar mein. Why does your mom the only person who needs a mixer or a fridge?"
Yeah, that's true.
So it's these little things that we don't notice. I think when we start accumulating this, like even when I tell them that, the mother's phone in the household is public property, but your own phone is not. Why are we treating them as people as not individuals?
Yeah,
And that, I think, was an important place that discovery happened in the kitchen.
that's true.
So I think that's why I think the kitchen is an extremely important place to learn these lessons, because a bachelor's kitchen will tell you that there's nobody paying attention to it. And a kitchen run by a woman who has a job will tell you more stories.
Yeah, that's true. This was great. Thank you so much for taking time out.